Okay, good evening. It's Monday, March 19th, Public Safety Building Committee meeting. Call a meeting to order at 7:06 p.m. I know Mr. Barry will be absent tonight. Mr. Officer, I do expect him at some point. And Mr. Rooney has dialed in, so just to remind the committee that any vote we take is going to be a roll call vote tonight and denoted as such in our meeting minutes per the remote participation policy. First item on the agenda is approval of meeting minutes from February 12th, 2018. Mr. Lyons did circulate a draft copy to the committee. Are there any comments for him? I just had third page, third bullet, the one that starts with Catherine Cook. In the last sentence says, Michael Moorhead agreed that we should pay the amount for the work requested. I just changed that to stated. The reason I did that was because we were talking in that same bullet point about 25% haircut, and I think, Mike, you were saying that you thought we should have paid 100%. I don't know what you were thinking in that, but
I had two schools of thought. Either we pay for it or it comes out of context budget, because a context fee. That was my thought on the matter back then.
Right, so I guess, did you want a 25% haircut, or did you want 0% haircut?
I either wanted a 0% haircut or a 100% paid for by context, because it's their consultant.
Okay.
So that was back
So
then.
you're okay with the word stated? Because the first start was about 25%. So it sounds like you were saying 0 or 100.
Correct.
Okay.
So what do we want mine to say?
I think it should just say stated, as opposed to agreed.
Agreed, sure, yeah, stated.
Or it should be a totally separate bullet point. I don't really.
I'll talk to Mike after.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
And then page 4, discussion of solar options for police canopies. Second sentence says the design team will have to check with Attorney General about taking the canopy out of the bid. I don't recall that.
It was on the tape.
I don't know if it was part of if they went out with it in coming back, but I was just looking for thoughts from others. Okay. So leave that as is then. And then page 5, second bullet point, the project went out to bid, was going to go out to bid on February 28th, which it did, not February 20th. So is there any other comments on the minutes? So I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as edited by my previous comments. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Wood. Is there any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Lyons?
Yes.
Aye. Malinowski, aye. Goodney?
Moorhead, aye.
Cook?
Aye.
Rooney?
Aye.
Wood?
Aye.
All right, motion carries unanimously. Next item, chairman's update, bid process. The bids are underway. I asked Mr. Lemieux for an update this afternoon on just the type of requests that between them and the design team that they're fielding. Seemed like very, very detailed requests in terms of thickness of floors was an example that I was given this afternoon. So there's a lot of people asking questions, but there's been no questions that have, I'll call it, stumped them or given them any sort of cause for concern. So they remain on track with all of that. And they're on pace for having the electronic results available the first week of April, so that literally on the night of town meeting we would know which direction we're headed and meet with the selectmen in the week thereafter to formalize the award process. Any questions on that? Solar canopies. So Mr. Purple, so I went to the selectmen right after our last meeting to request authorization to go out to get an RFP consistent with our committee vote to try to take the cost completely out of the project and have a third-party vendor bear that cost in exchange for obviously the energy that they would be generating from the solar. The selectmen did unanimously approve that request to go out to RFP. The one concern that was raised was by the chair about the town not bearing additional expenses down the road, as things needed to be replaced. So I know that there was going to be care taken to make sure that that was, anyone that signed up to do this, that there wasn't going to be any unforeseen expenses 5 years, 10 years down the road on that. So where that has gone is there was no formal RFP issued yet to date. However, Mr. Purple is working with Mr. Parent to go through our energy, what's the acronym, Mr. Purple? The Energy Services Company, to see if they can, which is already procured through the town, to see if they can't find a way to do the RFP proposal for this. Should that not be feasible, it seems like it is feasible, I guess was the response I got. If that's not feasible, then there would be an RFP issued. I have stressed the importance of knowing that someone is willing to bear that cost before we all sit here and in conjunction. It's really going to be the Board of Selectmen's, vote. We're just advisors to them. Before someone rejects the solar canopy item because we think we had a solution and we really didn't have that solution. So I trust that Mr. Purple and the team are working diligently toward that so that we have that information to help guide the right decision when it comes to award day. Any questions on that? All right. The next item is invoices for approval. The first invoice that we were presented was a Vertex invoice dated February 14th, 2018. This was for services rendered during January by Vertex for the amount of $10,075.32. Are there any questions on that invoice that was presented? Okay, I'll make a... Go ahead, Mr. Rooney.
Yeah, first of all, thank my committee members and any of the audience that's there tonight for allowing me to participate remotely. On page 6 of the packet, Jason, there was a John Greenwood consultant who put in about 83 hours, the description being pre-qualification response tracking. I don't know what that is.
So that was, Vertex used a subcontractor, so the person was not an employee of Vertex, to help them with the vetting of the 100+ responses that they received to the pre-qualification. So all of the electrical, all of the HVAC companies, they, to go through that vetting process. Obviously, Mr. Goodney and Ms. Cook did a lot of work, but they did a lot of work on the back end too.
Yeah, I guess I was just under the assumption that that was a service that Vertex was supplying to us without the need for subcontracting, but maybe I was alone in that regard. That's the only question I had, Jason.
But it's still part of their fee.
Mike, Kathy?
It's still part of their fee.
Yes, yes.
So it's not an additional
Additional.
cost.
That's correct. It's just who they chose to use to do it.
We would pay them or have this, that gentleman?
That's correct. Before I make a motion on that particular invoice, I was remiss to not point out that I specifically asked Mr. Lemieux so that I could update this committee where they stood from a budgetary perspective in terms of what they had quoted us, because remember, they're time and materials, not fixed fee. And he was estimating somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 under budget at the completion of the bidding process for what they had initially quoted us. So I think, they've managed their time well, and that savings goes directly back into our budget.
And then when it's time to go to the next phase with them, we're going to do what?
Let's tackle that under agenda item 7.
All right, sorry.
And are they really fixed fee right now?
No,
Or T&M?
they're always time and material. They're not a fixed fee. That's how the contract was, and neither party asked for fixed fee either.
Okay.
So I guess with that, I'll make a motion to approve the Vertex invoice dated February 14th, 2018 as presented. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Goodney. Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Lyons?
Yes.
Malinowski, aye. Goodney?
Aye.
Moorhead?
Morehead, aye.
Cook?
Aye.
Rooney,
Aye.
Wood.
Aye.
All right, motion carries unanimously. Next invoice is Vertex's invoice for February, dated March 12th, 2018, in the amount of $20,677.85. Are there any questions on this particular invoice? All right, with that, I'll make a motion to approve the invoice as presented. Is there a second?
I second.
Seconded by Mr. Goodney. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Lyons.
Aye.
Malinowski, aye.
Goodney, aye.
Moorhead.
Aye.
Cook.
Aye.
Rooney.
Aye.
Wood.
Aye.
All right, motion carries unanimously. We then have a rather lengthy list of other contractor invoices that have been vetted and recommended for approval via Vertex per their letter dated March 13th, 2018. I guess the total amount to all vendors is $316,363.59. Almost 90+% of that is to two invoices to our architectural firm. Are there any questions or any one of these that the committee wants to kind of unpack further or ask questions on?
I did. The two, for context, why are they different? How are they different? Do you know?
2 different months. So
That's all
they
it was?
they basically submitted their invoice for January on the date of our last meeting. Because it wasn't in our packet, I didn't feel comfortable, or on our agenda, I didn't feel comfortable bringing it forward. So just time that's
Okay.
passed.
So do we know why Vertex put one in designer category and one in construction? In their budget?
In their budget spreadsheet.
Or, yeah.
Um,
That was the only thing that was throwing me off.
I can go back and ask
Yeah,
him, but
okay.
it's all related to construction documents, pre-qualification, and the actual, where we stand really in the process for the
I wonder if-
designer.
I wonder if one of them was prequel. Okay,
Definitely was,
That's what I got the impression.
yeah.
okay.
With that next stage of documents.
Are there any other questions on this? The only other thing I'll just note for the record, the reason it says revised in the top left was there was a version submitted to me that had some invoices that didn't belong to us. So if anyone questions where the original version is, you're welcome to have it, but kind of was a first level of review. So with that, I'll make a motion to approve the numerous invoices listed in the Vertex letter dated March 13th, 2018 as revised. Is there a second?
Second,
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any further conversation? All right, roll call vote. Lyons,
Aye.
Malinowski, aye. Goodney,
aye.
Moorhead,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Rooney,
Aye.
Wood.
Aye.
All right, motion carries unanimously. Consistent with prior meetings, I've asked Mr. Lemieux to include the project update, budget update. I think Mr. Moore had already asked the question about that. I'll go back to him and ask him to think about how he's lined that up.
They're putting them, yeah.
I think, this continues to, if anyone were to kind of walk back to the last meeting, look at the invoices we approved, there should be now a nice track record going forward here of now this set of invoices that we've just approved should now show up as being paid. Mr. Purple has been working with Mr. Lemieux on a process to make sure that our vendors are being paid regularly. Obviously, we had a bunch of invoices pile up here over the last couple of weeks while we haven't been meeting, but there will be a process in place going forward, and I think we'll probably have a cadence of once a month once we get the shovels in the ground. So are there any questions that I can, related to the project budget? Okay. Project schedule update. So I've been exchanging communication with Mr. Purple to try, our next meeting is, we're gonna know the results, one way or another. I think this is gonna happen in 2 phases. So I think as of now, I think on the night of town meeting, my expectation is that we would spend a couple of minutes briefing the Board of Selectmen just on where the numbers have shaken out. Are we trending high? Are we trending low? Are we trending right on budget. There would not be a request for a award on that night, because our design team would still have to do some vetting with the DCAM and other certifications that would be necessary. But I think we would have a general idea of where we're headed. So if that were to help them in any way with any of the, especially the associated articles to this project in terms of the golf, et cetera, that the town meeting voters would know where we stand. It's my understanding that I may be asked under Article 1 to provide a very quick project update. Obviously, that would be a part of that update is kind of where we've trended with this and the contingency that we're left running into the project, right? Is it the 1.7 where we stand today? Does it go up? Does it go down? Just so the town knows kind of where we stand on all of that. So then the goal would be on their April 17th meeting, which is their second meeting in April, that there would be a formal award of the contract and that we would be shovels in the ground by May 1st, according to our owner's project manager, which means some sort of groundbreaking in 2 weeks after that award. I've already, I asked the Board of Selectmen when I last appeared before them, if they have a quorum issue that week, especially because that's the vacation week, that we meet late in the week of town meeting, so right before everyone kind of clears out for vacation, to get not only this awarded, but Karen is going to be coming forward with the results of the water line extension to the project, which ultimately falls under our budget as well. So basically 2 awards related to this project in that night. So I guess for now, circle the night of town meeting an hour early, and the night of 17th, which would be the regularly scheduled Board of Selectmen's meeting. There would be 2 posted meetings for our committee with them. Ultimately, I think we have a presentation at each. I don't know that we have to have a quorum, but I think just it's really the results of our last year's worth of work. So to the extent that everyone's available, we should make an effort to attend. And I will alert everyone if the meeting on the 17th gets pushed up to the week prior.
This presentation at town meeting, is this something that you're gonna do by yourself as a summary of what's been going on, or should it be something that we maybe look at first and?
So I just learned about it like 24, 48 hours ago. So I'm open to whatever the committee would like me to do. I think it's really going to be a brief summary.
I mean, even if
what
is it gonna be like a PowerPoint type thing where you just go through 6 or 7 slides and
It may
that's
not
something
have-
we could approve all, look at it through email and then approve it
If
just before the meeting?
I'm open to feedback. I was thinking no PowerPoint, and here's my rationale. If I'm a town meeting voter, I've already sat through
voted it.
5-6 hours of this. I want to know where do we stand? Are you using all the money I approved? Are you using some of it, or are you expecting to use a lot less? Where are you trending? Right, there's going to be something that we all know we're going to eat into the contingency more for something we don't know about yet, throughout the project. I just want to provide a general trend, because I think if you start going into precise slides and precise numbers, but that's where I stand on this. I'm open to feedback. I mean, it's literally the start of town meeting, so.
Just for your information, in the past, the moderator has wanted presentations in advance, both so they can be staged and so he can approve them.
I'm well aware.
So,
Yeah.
you know,
And
the
there's a
day
time
of, you're probably
constraint.
not going to get away with.
So Jason, the one PowerPoint slide you might want to put up there is what you presented at the town meeting where the project was approved, where you actually show that. Assuming that we're going to come in very close to that, which it looks like right now, we think we are. And I agree with you, I would not get into contingencies or anything else, or using whatever. I just simply say, this is what we told you, and this is where we are. We're actually hoping this might be a one-night town meeting, miraculously, so.
Yeah, I don't wanna
I'd make
send
it
it-
very quick,
Yeah.
then let the Taj Mahal people get up there and say what they're gonna say, and be done with it.
Okay, so all basically, I guess, general consensus, everyone in favor of that one slide, which would basically be the budget from last year, and I say we're trending very close to the 22.6, a lot under the 22.6, or somewhere in between, right? And we'll have a time to discuss that an hour before the meeting, because that's literally when we're gonna,
Will that include our timetable? of like, you know,
We can,
when we're
we can
gonna-
put a timetable in
Yeah.
that's consistent with the project schedule, right? Like breaking
That's
of
what people are
ground,
asking me, is it, what's the deal? I haven't heard anything.
breaking of ground May 1st, move in June of 2019.
Yep.
Okay. So I think there was an email I got about when I have to submit the slides by, so I'll take that slide from last year, add a timetable that's consistent with the project meeting schedule that we've already been presented, and that's it.
That's good, that's good.
Okay. And just make a habit of checking your town emails for updates on the meeting schedule, but for now, next meeting is the night of town meeting, joint with the Board of Selectmen. I don't anticipate it being long unless we get a unanticipated result. All right, next item on the agenda is discussion of the clerk of the works. So, if you flash back to the interview process, some of the owners, project managers brought their designated clerk of the works to the interviews, and some said, I have a list of people that I'll present to you for interview. Vertex was the latter. I actually spent the 20 minutes to re-listen to their interview today, and you'll understand why I did that in a second. So I've asked Mr. Lemieux to bring forward the candidates, and I got a call last Wednesday saying, we don't really have anyone on staff right now that can fulfill your need. The two individuals that were referenced specifically at the interview, one, it was the Littleton Fire reference, which I had vetted with Chief Wazinski. That project completed in January, so they thought it would be a nice transition. Well, that individual will be spending the next year and a half on Nantucket because they broke ground in the last couple of weeks. So he is no longer available to us. And then the second individual that was integral with the Randolph facility has since left Vertex in the last couple of weeks. And then there was an individual from Situate who is, she is currently deployed on a harbor master project with another town, clearly one of the towns along the water. I forget which town it is. So they don't have anyone right this second. They have an interview on Thursday for someone that they think would be a good candidate for clerk of the works for this project. That person may or may not work out, right? They're doing their own vetting. And my understanding is that this person would be hired specifically to work on the Southborough project. They're not hiring them for any other need at Vertex. So I felt a responsibility that I had to update the committee on this because I wasn't thrilled because I thought, we've stuck to our timeline, right on. So it wasn't exactly like we knew, but it seemed, and what Vertex would say is that, they didn't anticipate this departure that occurred. So I guess what we need to decide, so presumably Vertex is going to either make an offer or not make an offer to this individual in the coming weeks. He or she, I believe it's a he, but I'm not positive, would then be available for interview to our committee for vetting. John said he would make any offer contingent upon that if that's what we wanted, but I think we just need to make our decision because that would be kind of embarrassing to have that hold this up. The other alternative is, let's just say the clerk of the works doesn't work out. John has committed to me to ease at least my individual fears that between himself, Steve, who obviously lives in town, and as many of you remember, Kevin, who was originally supposed to be the project manager, between those three, they would have to fill that role, and they wouldn't be filling it at their billing rates, they would be filling it at the clerk of the works rates. So we can take there's no action required, but I did put if there's action that someone wants to direct me to take, that's fine. But if the committee stays silent on the issue tonight, what the next steps are going to be is Vertex is going to provide a candidate or two. I'm not confident of the or two, but for interview. we need to make a decision on whether we want a full committee interview or whether we want to delegate the chair or a designee to just meet and greet and say, yep, this person will fill our needs. And regardless of the outcome of that, know that really Vertex is standing behind kind of their, I'll call it their executive level team, is going to have to backfill any needs, should that clerk of the works not, be fully up to the responsibilities of this project. Or we could take a complete 180, and we're not under contract, is my understanding, for, the clerk of the works piece of this. It is built into the framework, and you could do a total 180 and, do an RFP. But if you want to do an RFP, unfortunately, I think you have to decide tonight so that we can be running that process independently. So those are the options I came up with. I guess I'll pause and listen for reaction or, game plan going forward. Mike?
When are we gonna put them under contract for construction, Vertex?
Well, I was looking to, so I
This
was
is
looking
part
to
of it.
kind of get that just shored up, because there was no reason not to get it shored up, and that's what generated this conversation. And every time I sent an email and didn't get a response, it generated a little bit more fear. And I think my fears unfortunately came a little bit.
Okay, well,
So my goal would have been, I would come in here tonight and saying, Vertex is ready to go with their contract. We just need town council to approve the amendment. And just make sure the committee was still comfortable with what Vertex was providing to us in terms of services.
I recall, I kind of brought this subject up very early on, and I read about the clerk of the works language, I think, in the law, that it could actually be another independent step to check on everybody, to help benefit the town. And I think when I brought that up, everybody said, you wait till construction, you wait till the end. It's kind of, this is probably the time to do that. I mean, if we have any questions about Vertex or some of these, I mean, that's what this is, another check where we could possibly save money through another party, not having them be directly reporting, being directly hired by Vertex. They'd be hired by us.
So you're assuming, Pete, that if we somehow found our own clerk of the works,
Right.
right? And I guess
We can hire
some
whoever we
independent
want.
contractor clerk of the works, that would save money?
I don't know that it would save money, but it would be another layer of review that's independent of everybody else we've been dealing with.
And I think the flip side to, I guess I don't look at clerk of the works OPM as the spot where we want, I think on record is this is not where I want to skimp, even though they've done a pretty good job of keeping their hours and checks. This is our one, I'll call it advocate on the project. So yeah, maybe having having two brains rather than one is better, but I wouldn't look at it as a cost savings measure. I would look at it
Yeah,
as,
I wouldn't either.
if you're looking at it as accountability,
No.
then, but I think we would be adding potential complexity because we still have to have an owner's project manager. So they would then have to be more coordinated with this third party, which may be another firm, it may be an individual, which they're not used to working with. I mean, you could also make the argument they're not used to working with whoever this person is that they're gonna bring in. So, Mr. Lyons, you had.
No, that's the only thing I'm just worried about. How are we gonna be getting an experienced person because the industry is so busy today? And do we have the right to hire and fire? So if this clerk doesn't work out, does the committee, or is it the Board of Selectmen that says we're not getting the performance out of the person that we anticipated?
So I don't think we have that right, but I think we could certainly go running and screaming to take the appropriate.
It's whatever's in the contract that you
Right.
sign, I think,
There's, there was a termination clause in the contract, but I think, I guess, the way I would, if you think about it as a decision tree, right, is if you're happy with Vertex as your owner's project manager, right, then you go to the next step of, do you continue with them as the clerk of the works? I think that was our general intention, or do you split it into two? If you continue with Vertex as your clerk of the works, then you have another decision is if said clerk of the works doesn't work, do you trust that they're gonna bring another person in, or that that executive leadership team is just gonna have to crank out some long hours on the site and be, I'll call it, more in the weeds than they would have been or had been anticipating being, which they obviously don't want that because it's gonna be a lower billing rate, and, you know, that will certainly eat into anyone's margin on the project, so.
They've got other things to do too, you would think, and this
It would
is
limit
not
their
going
ability to take on another project, that's for sure.
And their attention to detail, I think, would be,
Mr. Rooney, did you have something?
Yeah, I gotta tell you, my disappointment is palpable, because when I was doing my due diligence on Vertex, the strength that kept coming back to me over and over again was the clerk of the works and the experience that they brought to the job site, and the relationship between Vertex and the clerk of the works and the building owner. And you know what? They said that these the two of the clerk of the works are unavailable. I mean, can we push back and say, well, listen, they need to be available, because one of the bases upon which I think at the end of the day we hired you was the ringing endorsement of these clerks of the works. And I don't know why all of a sudden we are at the bottom, or we're the second fiddle, and the other clerk of the works have been assigned elsewhere.
And why
I
did
gotta tell you-
Nantucket go before us?
I'm sorry?
You know, they basically took the guy that we wanted and put him on the Nantucket project.
Right.
because it came up.
They started construction.
Yeah, so I would say, that individual was in it like worked out perfectly for them from a phasing perspective, it sounds like. It sounds like the day Littleton ended, or roughly around that time, Nantucket began. And just John, I don't know if you remember this from, because I had helped with some of the vetting of the references for Vertex originally. Nantucket has a very long history with Vertex. Like, anytime they do anything over there, they have Vertex involved. So they're the owner's project manager for the town, so any building project. So I think they're managing five plus projects over there currently, is my understanding.
It's a little
Yeah, I
disconcerting that he didn't tell you about this
understand
either
that.
before now.
No, John, it's funny because when John shared the news with me, I vividly remembered the interview comments, and I'm pointing to the side of the table that you usually sit on, and I said to John Lemieux, I said, my guess is John Rooney's gonna be very disappointed with this news, because given the references that you had checked and the references I had checked, we had a list of folks. Now, you can't control that this individual left. I think we've all had that happen to us in our professional careers, But
also, Jason, if I may say, is that during the interview of Vertex, when I brought up the strength of the clerk of the works and whether or not the particular clerk of the works at Situate could be ours, the comment was, well, I don't know if she'll be available, but you will have an equally talented clerk of the works. And now we come to find out that they don't have anyone. So, you know, I don't know if we can push back and get someone, but you know, I just wanted to register my extreme disappointment with how this shook out.
Mike?
I have two comments. Then I think if they're good at getting clerk of the works, they can get a good clerk of the works and come through for us. And I'd rather push this back on them. I don't want to take it on as a town. I think it's part of their service. But that said, and I'm going to look to you, John, because I don't even know what these guys are going to do a ton of the time. I mean, it's a full-time job, but I'm not sure what they're doing 24/7 or 40 hours a week on the site. Could you speak a little bit to what they do?
Yeah, I worked hand in hand, and they were there for every pour, every piece of metal that
Good
goes up.
representative.
Yeah, they're taking pictures. You know, we found some flaws in the steel work that had to be corrected. You know, so it's integral part.
Right,
They have to know what they're doing.
Yeah, okay, yeah, so, and I think we get the same thing out of the architects as well, so it's just a recording of what's going on site, so I'm not too concerned about, I guess, all of this with the clerk of the works. So, and I do think Vertex can find us a good one. So those are my comments on that. I don't want to do this as part of our scope, a new RFP.
Yeah, and I can reach out to my clerk of the works and see if he knows people in the
I mean,
industry.
how unrealistic is it to have someone within their existing firm, whether it's Mr. Lemieux or Mr. Theron, drop down and be the clerk of the works? I understand it's going to be a billing hit for them, but again, at the end of the day, we went based upon representation, so I think they should be willing to make an accommodation as well.
Yeah, and I think it behooves them to find us the right individual, and I think, what I might have put these words into his mouth, to be completely candid, but I said, obviously, if this job went sideways from an OPM perspective, it probably wouldn't be the best for them as a firm going forward doing public safety projects in the state, right, or in the general area, anywhere they're trying to get an OPM, right, is if we actually had to go to the Board of Selectmen and say we have an issue, right, that's naturally gonna catch some sort of press, coverage that someone could easily find on Google, just do a search.
Well, I agree with Mike. I don't think that we should go out yet and try to find a clerk of the works. You would think they could do a better job than we could with their contacts, and I'm sure they're going to try it really, really hard because of what you just said. So I hope John Lemieux is going to keep you posted in a very timely manner at this point as far as what's going on. I'm sure you
I
asked
think
him
he
to.
got the message. There anyone, Mike and Kathy seem to be going, let's trust them that they're gonna rally and figure this out. I think there's a general disappointment here across the board that I can continue to message.
I mean, you're right. We've all had people quit that worked with us, for us, whatever, and, you know, it doesn't always happen the way you should, and you figure it out. So these guys are professionals, so my guess is they will get this resolved quickly.
What authority do we have, say they bring in
Mike,
sorry. What authority do we have if they bring in a project manager that, a clerk of the works that we're not real happy with, to push them into backfilling with Mr. Lemieux and Mr. Theron?
I think we just have to advocate, right? I think that's, you bring them in front of the committee, and you say, we're not satisfied with X, Y, or Z, and we need to find a resolution. I think any of us that are in the consulting field, right, if someone's not happy with our team, we always have to step down and make sure that it gets done, because ultimately, you know, they're trying to protect their brand and do what they promised, and I think they want to do what they promised as well. Mr. Rooney?
Well, yeah, again, I don't want to dead horse, but I assume Vertex is going to want a positive recommendation from us when we're all done and through. So I stand contingent upon them to get this done right. And I think Kathy and Michael said, listen, let's have them do it. I agree with that. At the same time, if they can't do it and they can't get someone to do it, they're going to have to do something to impress us with the clerk of the work, whether it's Mr. Lemieux or Mr. Theron.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm hearing we're gonna trust their process, and there's gonna be a candidate or candidates brought forward. They suggested one committee member to do a meet and greet. The only other option is to do a full committee meeting. We can't do anything in between. So I don't know if the committee has a temperature on that.
I don't think you'd want me to do it.
I'm personally fine with Jason
I was
being
gonna
the
suggest the
meet
chair
and
as well.
greeter.
Okay,
I'd like to sit down too, with you, if you wouldn't mind.
so then I have to have a
Well,
posted
nothing.
meeting if there's more than one person. Because then that could be viewed as deliberation between two members, even though it's not a quorum. I don't,
So you could
Can we do
post it
that?
and you two do it.
yeah, so we can do that, yeah.
Because if that's the case, I'll come too. I mean,
Well,
Where
if
are
we're
we
gonna,
gonna
if we're gonna add on, I'm either doing all, I guess, I'm a firm believer in it's either one person or all 9 are invited. I don't wanna try to, and I'm not setting up another subcommittee.
can we post a meeting, not have a quorum, and still discuss?
We can,
Discuss, but you can't vote.
can't vote, and you can't use that discussion in any further slippery road, guys, that were,
I'm out.
But will the committee have to vote to hire the person, like approval?
no.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'd rather put it back on
Yeah.
Vertex to
So
hire.
we're either really just doing it as you're either basically bringing them back and re-interviewing Vertex essentially as a firm if you're bringing one person in front of 9 of us,
Hmm.
or you're just kind of using it as hey, just as a outreach, this is your main contacts with the town of Southborough, you know, to have the discussion.
So,
I would just want to make sure that they didn't hire just anybody because they were desperate. So that's what I'd want you to, just to make sure of, and then,
I agree with that, Kathy.
you know.
could you send us the resumes if you go by yourself? If
Yeah,
not,
I mean,
no,
look, I don't want to go by myself, but I'm kind of, unless someone has any other solutions. And my understanding is ex officios count as potential deliberation from when we were dealing with the whole subcommittee thing.
Hey, Jason?
Go ahead, Mr. Rooney.
Yeah, given the fact that they've obviously got a good track record in hiring clerk of the works based upon the feedback we've received, again, I think the onus should be on them to go out and get one equally as qualified and then present him or her to us. I don't see why you have to spend some time, you have to spend any time doing their job.
Well-
Again, that's my own thought.
Go ahead, Pete.
It's our job, that's why. So if we choose to have somebody else do our job for us, we can do that. But ultimately, the clerk of the works, hiring a clerk of the works is our job. We can pick whoever we want. We chose to go with a project manager that has one on staff, but that's not what we're required to do. We could do one totally individual of that.
Yeah, well,
That's-
Peter,
that's
the only
what the
problem
whole
I
thing
have
is
with that
signed
is
up to be.
I don't know the skill set necessary to make that hire. I would have to rely on
Well,
someone with the expertise of Vertex.
They would be in on it, and they could share their experience, but ultimately, we answer for this performance of the clerk of the works. And I remember, I think we eliminated people, or we weren't happy with some of the presenters because we didn't like some of their clerk of the works. I'm looking up the law right now, I'm trying to look it up, but I can't find it,
Which one?
the clerk of the works.
It's in there, I just started reading.
So
I trust you, Jason, if you want to go yourself, but I mean, I think we'd all.
I wish I could have company, but
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone has any. I'm trying to be trained. I think everyone understands what I'm trying to do here.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
But do you want to take all that kind of heat if it doesn't work out?
It's gonna be
It's
my,
fine if it
it's gonna be
works
my
out.
fault either way, right?
If it works out, it's fine,
Well,
but if it doesn't,
Well, look, I think at the next committee meeting where we have our consultants present, regardless of who they've brought forward, these meetings are traditionally taped. I think we need to get Mr. Lemieux up here for a conversation again and have him commit to, on tape, to what he already committed to me over the phone when he brought this issue forward, that between him, Mr. Theron, and Mr. Heffernan, that they will figure out a way to service this town and make sure it gets done the right way. I don't know, can't think of any better way to hold someone accountable with this. So even if they bring forward an absolute dud and we miss it, I think that's kind of your, backup policy. That's, I guess, as much as I'm disappointed, that's why I don't really want to pull a full 180 on this, because I just think it's time and effort that may lead us back to the same result. So I guess with that, unless someone thinks differently, I'll wait for Mr. Lemieux to reapproach me. I told him he has till the end of this week, and that we wanted this not to be a nagging sort of item. And then I guess what I will commit, if I'm uncomfortable with anything, I'll either recommend that that person then meet with one of our ex officio members, or bring that person in front of the full committee. Does that seem fair? All right. So other business, 2 items, very, very minor in terms of updates, but go ahead.
Give his number.
Just press redial.
How did you know?
Do I have to dial? 9
does it take a hint?
Yeah, do you need the number? Mike, if it doesn't work, not, the two items do not require a vote, so we can just note in our minutes that he dropped at the end of this discussion.
I've got no doubt. Hi, John? John? There?
You might have to
I
hang
can
it up.
barely hear you.
What if it's a speaker?
You're in there somewhere, aren't you?
You're fine.
There you are. Can we hear you now?
Yeah, I got you.
All right.
I will not be as ornery.
Don't move.
So, two very, very quick updates for the committee. Number one is that town council reviewed the contract that will ultimately be between the town and the general contractor, and has signed off on the language, and that was issued as an addenda to all the general contractors. So I was remiss earlier when we talked about the project schedule, why we're going to be able to turn it around between bid date, bid award by the selectmen, and actual shovel in the ground, is because that framework's already in place. So we're not going to have a series of back and forths, right? It's going to be inserting a few names, inserting some numbers, and moving forward from there. So I think that was a very positive step that has been taken. Kind of, I'll call it, in the background, but all GCs know what they're signing up for now from a language perspective. So I think that will be very helpful to take some of the heavy lifting that we had to deal with the design team and the OPM off the table. The second item is more of an FYI, is the planning board submitted a invoice to, I guess it's a task authorization to Mr. Purple, which is the third one, from Fuss and O'Neill. It related to some final additional fees they had to wrap up the planning board process. The total was just shy of $3,000. So it falls within kind of the auto approval of Mr. Purple's authorization that we gave originally. There was vetting done with Vertex on that, just to make sure that it all tied together. There's no vote that we need to take tonight on that, but there will be an invoice that would then be presented to us for payment. So when that comes back up, consistent with the policy that we all came up with at the beginning of the project, I thought it was important to raise that now. I personally wasn't thrilled that it came 2 months after the planning board process ended. And would just like to encourage, Mr. Purple to have a conversation with Fuss and O'Neill's representatives. It's a bigger picture for the town, right? Because Fuss and O'Neill services a bunch of boards and committees. That sort of stuff, even though in the grand scheme of our project is a small number, it just optically doesn't look good, especially when they had been submitting authorizations ahead of time for all the other work, and then all of a sudden, there was some reconciling done on the back end of the accounting and the math wasn't working. But the hours did look legitimate. Those people were in a room, so
And we didn't already pay this through Vertex's.
No,
We're not
Fuss
paying
and
this
O'Neill.
twice?
So Fuss and O'Neill is a third-party consultant to the planning board. So Fuss and O'Neill submits an invoice to planning. Planning sends the invoice to Vertex. This was not an invoice. This was basically a statement of work, or they call it a task authorization. So it's basically saying you're authorizing us to incur these hours that we've already incurred, is essentially what they've asked.
As long as we're not paying twice.
Yeah, I think if Mr. Purple, you want to weigh in, by just in full transparency on the project, I think that's why I'm bringing it forward to you. It's a small number, but I think the optics speak for themselves. Any other requests? All right, so next meeting, night of town meeting, I'll post for that, and I'll post once we have confirmation of the 17th with Board of Selectmen. All right, with that, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Mr. Goodney. We need to do roll call. Lyons,
Aye.
Malinowski, aye. Goodney,
Aye.
Moorhead,
I
Cook,
Aye.
Rooney,
Aye.
and Wood. Aye. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, John.
Do we have to,